coming to the seminars today. I know Gordon put a lot of work into the organizing this, and Sergio. And again, there's a lot of history with this event, and a lot of people actually in this room made a lot of history for these micro airplanes that we're building. I'm going to talk about today a little bit about some micro scale techniques and how I built some of my scale little micro models, some of my latest builds, and a little bit about my micro F3P airplanes. I think Sergio said, what was it, almost 10 years since we had our last seminar here, and so a lot of this stuff, we actually, Gordon and I did our micro F3P airplanes last year, but we really didn't get a chance to talk about them, so I'll just mention that. All right, a little bit about my history I'd like to mention and how I got into micro models. Kind of cool. I went to school in Arizona, Prescott, Arizona, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University for flying. And I was into model airplanes before that. And I started when I was a kid. I did some free flight stuff like everybody else, and I got the bug and spent a lot of time, just building and crashing airplanes. Live on this big field, and it was funny because I learned how to fly by myself. I used to go to this hobby shop, and back then you couldn't buy ready-to-fly airplanes. So I'd walk into the hobby shop and I'd look at the ceiling, and these guys had these planes built, ready to go. And they were booked together. Oh man, they wanted like a lot of money. I said, all right, I can't do that. So I built my own airplane, and I had no idea how to fly. And my family all grew up around aviation. They were pilots, a lot of people in my family, So it's funny. I went out there, and every time I started the airplane up to fly, I would get like crowds of people coming, like they knew it was going to crash. And I was like, go out there, and they'd be like, oh no, So I'd look around, make sure nobody's around. I'd start the little Cox engine, and like 10 minutes later, my cousins would be there laughing at me, like, how much did that cost? How long did it take you to build that thing? So I'd go back and build it again. And another good story is I went out, I think it was MRC, came out with this beautiful fiberglass Cherokee, and fiberglass and foam. And it was, I don't even know what it was at the time. It was expensive again. I was a kid. I bought this thing. It was my first aileron. And it was like some of the young guys start now, they want to go right to that P-51. They don't want to start out with that nice high wing slow trainer. They want that P-51. So I think that's where I was at. I had this beautiful Piper Cherokee, and I was like, I'm going to fly this plane. So I get it out there and I get all ready to go, and I start it up, and my uncle was sitting there, and he's a character because he used to have a 150 Cessna, and he'd fly with a pipe in his mouth, and he comes over, yeah, that's a nice airplane here, he's looking at it, and I'm checking the controls, that looks good. So I take off, and I go to the left-hand turn, and the airplane rolls to the right and crashes into the ground in a million pieces. All fire up, like, what the heck? So I bring it back over and look at it, and I look at the ailerons, and I hook it back up, and I hook the ailerons up backwards. And Uncle Lou sat there and watched the whole thing, and it's like, he didn't tell me I had them backwards, but that was my first aileron trainer, which was my lesson, and not to start out with an expensive fiberglass airplane. But anyway, going back to a little bit about my history, how I got started in the micro RC. I love model airplanes, and like I said, I went to Embry-Riddle, and they used to have these fly-ins out west. They still have them in Phoenix, and in where I went to school in Prescott. But these I used to go to Phoenix, the 1/8 Air Force flying. So I'd go there, and I was at one of these events, and this guy had this small, it wasn't even small, it was probably like 30 inches airplane. And he was out there flying this thing, doing loops, rolls, inverted passes, and I'm like, holy cow, on that little small airplane, we're all flying this big stuff, And I went and talked to the guy, and he was nice enough to sit down. He says, yeah, it's got this little Canon RC system in it. I'm like, what does that thing weigh? I don't even know what the Canon system weighed at the time. Might have been like an ounce or something. It was heavy. But maybe not that much. But so I went ahead and I ordered one of these systems, and I got the Canon Super Micro system. And I remember, first I got it, I was like, wow, what am I going to put this in? Well, I started thinking about, went to the hobby shop and had these free flight scale airplanes, these little Bentham free flights. They had a P-51, a Zero, and I'm trying to think what else they had, maybe a Messersmith or something. So I took the P-51, I put like a TD-010 in it or something, or 020, and I put this little Cox radio in it. And I got the thing flying, it was only rudder and elevator. And I took it down to that 1/8 Air Force. And again, the last airplane they saw was like 30 inches. So this might have been like 6 months later. They held this event twice a year. And I flew this thing, and they went nuts. They're like, holy cow, how'd you get that airplane to fly? So it was pretty incredible. And the adrenaline, I was so excited. Like, how could I go? Just like now, like, how could I go smaller? How could I progress this even further? The only problem with those little foam airplanes was, with the gas, is after probably like 9 flights, they were fuel soaked and they were like bricks. So every flight would get heavier and heavier, and it wasn't that great. And then came the electrics. We started messing with the electrics, and Sergio mentioned the KRC event, which was a fantastic event. We went there all these years, and when that stopped, of course we came here, and it's an interesting story because in the beginning of the NEAT Fair, Tom used to give it. We talk about awards, and awards really, I mean, awards are nice and memories and stuff like that. You know, we don't really necessarily care about the awards, but we care about the progress we made. You know, trying to build these airplanes. You know, how far can we go, and what can we learn from other people, and all that stuff. So Tom used to give an award for the smallest airplane, and I'm pretty sure Henry won the first year. I don't know what it was, like a peanut scale. You know, he had this airplane. You know, and I'm thinking like, wow, how can I go smaller? So it was 2001, and let's see where I have it. I think it's in here. It was 2001, and I went ahead and I won the award for the smallest. That was the smallest airplane in 2001. Like a 9-inch wingspan or whatever it was, and this has a KPO motor. It might even had Rick's radio on it. It was a 3-channel Rick? Your old system?
3-channel.
It had to have Rick's in it because this has these like huge like 1-gram actuators in it. So I believe it had Rick's system in it. And Henry actually worked. You know, this is called a bat. Henry did the design for the bat. So it was a great flying airplane with a lot of wing area. And like I said, I flew that at one of the first couple of NEAT fairs. And it was fantastic. I should have got it flying for this event, and it would still fly well today. Henry flies several of them with some CO2 motors. But it was funny because after that year, Tom's like, forget this award for the smallest airplane. You guys get the market cornered, so he stopped giving out the award. Now he gives an award for like I think he still does for the largest airplane. But it was kind of cool. So that brought us to our seminars where Sergio asked me and Henry, of course, to start talking about our planes. And it was kind of a show and tell format. I'm like, I'm not really a good speaker. I'm like, well, what are we going to talk about? And Sergio's like, just bring your airplanes and start talking about them. So, we'd like this. We'd open up the box. Well, I did this one here. I did this to it, that to it. And it grew into a nice event. And and of course, as Gordon mentioned, we started the indoor and all that. I do have to mention when we had the flood. Henry and I, because Henry was here that year, 2004, and we actually made it to the gym. We were the only ones. I think Cindy was with me, and we actually made it. Oh, did you make it to the gym?
Yes.
Okay, you were there, so it must have been us. Yeah. I think there was like 4, maybe 5 of us. We drove by here, and we saw the. I mean, it was like the cars were flooded and all that stuff. And the only way we got there was Henry was in the military. Flew C-130s and stuff, and he talked to one of the guards. They had the road closed, and he talked to one of the guards. And I don't know how he did it, but he talked the guard out of letting us through. So we got to the Walton High School.
I was good at that.
Yeah, and we're like, where is everybody? I don't know, So we flew. I don't know how many hours we flew, but we made the best of it, and we flew all night. So yeah, that was pretty cool. Okay, so then, actually a good story is how I met Henry. I started thinking of how I could go smaller, and obviously at the time with electric motors and these heavy NiCad batteries, it was kind of tough. So electrics really wasn't practical for going smaller. So the only way was to go with CO2. So I played with CO2 some free flight when I was younger, but it was like that little telco system. It was pretty much not that great. It wasn't the best little CO2 motor. And of course, Bill Brown, had his collection. I started looking at some of those motors, but I didn't know a whole lot about it. So I made contact with Henry. He had a video. Henry put a video out. Still, I don't know if it was on VHS. Maybe somebody should actually copy that and put it on like a DVD format, because it was a very informative video on CO2 and how to operate all these things and to get the most efficiency out of these little CO2 motors. So I talked to Henry on the phone, and we became good friends. And actually, that's how I met James Basine, because he was involved with CO2. So Henry started coming out to the NEAT and flying some of these airplanes, and we kind of pooled our knowledge. And again, John Worth with his Cloud9 newsletter. We again, like Sergio said, we put all this stuff in that newsletter, and it got people like Matt and of course Ben and everybody else that came here over the years, and really built this event to what it is today. So, but anyway, talking about that, a little bit of my history with the CO2 stuff. I wanted to go smaller, and I love scale airplanes. So I thought, boy, wouldn't it be cool to do like a little scale, like 1/72nd or 1/48th, because nobody was building these things at scale. They were doing whatever sizes, and I always did some plastic models. So I went ahead and I designed a Corsair. Actually, I should back up a little bit, because Sergio had a little free flight Corsair from England at a wall fall. From Mark, right? And Nick had, so I took that idea to heart, and I went ahead and designed an exact 1/72nd scale version of that airplane. And I have the airplane somewhere. Ironically, I couldn't find it, but I did find a picture. So this was my Corsair, and that had a Gasparin 2.6 CO2 motor in it. and I believe it had to have one of Nick's radios. And actually, ironically, it was three. It has an elevator. It was 3 channels, and I also did a Hellcat around the same time. And I don't know for sure. I don't have it marked down, but I'm pretty sure this was the first 1/72nd scale RC model to fly, years ago. And I used little, we used little watch batteries to power the receiver, and the actuators actually looked pretty small. Nick wound the actuators, and it had gas bearings, little CO2 motor, and it would fly for, almost a minute or two on a decent charge. So it's pretty impressive. Actually, this first Corsair I built did not fly that well. I always say my Hellcat was pretty much the first one that flew, because that actually would fly, for a minute or two. This thing, I don't know, for whatever reason, just wasn't the best flying airplane. But I can pass this around. You guys can look at it. You've seen it.
Oh, we've seen it.
You've seen it. A lot of you guys seen all this stuff. But so anyway, I did that Corsair, and then went on some other stuff. Let's see what else I was going to talk about here. Okay, so let's talk about how I designed some of these little scale airplanes. I took that one step further, and there's nothing like a beautiful little scale model flying. So I went ahead and started designing some of these airplanes, to be as scale as possible. We started out making these things out of wall foam, and that worked great because it was very light. But then, of course, Bob Hurd came out with the Durabatics foam, which really changed the game as far as these little scale airplanes, and also other free flight airplanes and small micro RC planes. The problem was we had to figure out how we could decorate them. Now you could paint them, and paint. I love the airbrush, I love the paint, but paint adds a lot of weight. So finally, actually, when I was working with Plantraco, when we kind of did that stuff too, we decided to see if we could print on the foam. And Robert Guillot actually was the master who developed the technique, because we were like, what the heck, we could paint these airplanes, we could, no, why don't we try to print on them? So he found a product called Inkaid, which is right here. There's a white and a clear Inkaid, and what it is, it basically, you could spray this or brush it on pretty much any surface, and you could send this stuff through an inkjet printer and it would print on it. So we're like, man, how the heck, let's try this on foam. So we did. And we developed a technique to print a foam and make these little airplanes, very detailed. I draw my graphics in Adobe Illustrator. You basically need a good graphics program, Corel Draw. I think Gordon does a lot of stuff in that. I use Adobe Illustrator. It's a vector graphics program, which really nice because you can blow these plans up or shrink them down, and they don't lose the detail. So they keep the detail. And you can see, like on my little Corsair here, this is one of my later versions, which flies really good. It's 1/72nd scale, 6.8 inches, and it weighs like 4 grams. Uses a DT receiver, just standard actuators and magnets, and it has actually has a butterfly geared motor in it, which is like a 5-to-1 gear ratio. However, Gordon mentioned those little motors, and there's hot 4mm, they call them 5mm motors, but they're out of the Pico Nano, that quad that Horizon sells. And I gave some to Ross, and they're the most powerful. Have you found anything more powerful, Nick? I think they're the most powerful 4mm motor to date, and it'll take this thing almost straight up in the air. And they work actually very well direct drive. I've been planning on trying them direct drive on some airplanes, but I know Ross did it. Have you done it, Nick?
What I got in my little cup.
That's what you have in the little cup. Oh, the same little hot little. So you can still buy these motors. You get them like for a 4-pack. If I put them in there, but they're like $10 for 4 of them. But they don't make the quadcopter anymore. So you guys, you might want to go online and grab a couple packs of these things. But I use them for all these airplanes now because they work really well. Okay, so basically I draw my graphics in Adobe Illustrator, and let's talk a little bit about how I design these airplanes. When I pick a design, I usually do a lot of research and get some 3D view drawings and check the history of the airplane and kind of decide what model I want to build. Another way I do it is I find a good high quality plastic model kit, and it's really a great resource. This is actually a Grumman duck, and I started working on this. It's another project. We start these projects and we don't finish them, but I started drawing up the Grumman duck, and that's as far as I got. So I got the wings done, and you can see, I'll pass this around so you can see the detail on the graphics. But I put a lot of work just in doing the wings, and I'll get back to it. But I pretty much use the same technique for most of these little tiny airplanes. What's nice about building in 1/72nd scale, 1/48 scale is you know, you got the exact size, and you could take these parts and you could put them right on a scanner and scan them right in there, exact size. So now you got the panel lines, you got the outline, and you know, everything you pretty much need, you know, for the wings and for the stabilizer and the rudder. As far as the fuselage goes, what I normally do is I make patterns. You know, you can make patterns, just copy in the fuselage, and I make patterns, and then I draw the patterns out in Adobe Illustrator and tweak them, and then I, you know, print them out onto my Durabatics foam. And these are actually some patterns for my Skyboss, so you can see. And a lot of people always ask, you know, how do you get the, you know, the curvature and all that stuff? I mean, this stuff is so thin. It's a shame they don't make it anymore. I mean, I still have a decent supply, and when I run out, I'll probably try to cut my own. I don't know if Nick's experimenting with it. I mean, there's some different foams out there we can do, but for now, I'm just going to keep using what I have. But this stuff, you know, it'll just bend around your finger. And what I do, I don't have a pen, but a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take a pen or a little roller, you know, and I'll just roll it back and forth. So you kind of roll the crease into the foam, you know, and then you can actually bend like the cowling or however you do. You just roll it right around that structure, and it'll hold the shape. But I'll pass these around so you can kind of see my printed. I got two of them here. I'll pass this one around.
You might mention that the thing is about this compared to Teflon, it has the skin on one side.
Oh yeah, Nick just mentioned it's a really important thing. It only has the skin on one side. So yeah, the bottom has no skin, the top has a skin. I'm not sure how Bob did this. I mean, I'm sure it's out there, but he did a great job on designing this Durabatics foam, and I use it for a lot of my models. So far, I haven't found anything comparable. I mean, as far as the quality, I mean, you can cut real thin foam. However, when I'm talking about my techniques for using the ink aid, I haven't found anything that takes the ink aid as well as the Durabatics. Let's talk about that real quick, because there's a little process for doing the ink aid. I mean, you could brush it on and get decent results, but I like to airbrush it. And the stuff's kind of thick, and it can clog a normal airbrush. So what I did, I bought one of those little detail guns, like for the cars. You know, like go to Harbor Freight, get one for like $30 or something. They're a decent compressor. And I like to mix the ink aid, about 70% ink aid to maybe 30% water. And it's not a hard, you know, you kind of just play with it. You know, you basically got to spray it, you know, see how it works. And once you get your right mixture, you're good to go. The ink aid works really good.
Clean the foam with alcohol before you spray that.
Oh, I always do that too. I forgot about that technique. So you got your sheet of foam, and what happens is if you don't do that, you'll see the fingerprints on them. And you learn by trial and error. It's a very important technique. So what I do is I tape my foam down to my table or wherever I'm going to, you know, and then I take your alcohol and it dries immediately. So you just wipe it with alcohol. So now you're ready to prep the foam.
Hey, Joe, I'm going to say something.
Yes.
The ink aid is wonderful stuff. I actually did an experiment where I sprayed it on clear Mylar.
Oh.
Adhered it to a sheet and then ran it through a printer, and I was able to print on clear Mylar that was treated with this ink aid and got really good graphics on Mylar. I mean, it's.
I was thinking of trying that. You know, I wonder how much.
I never went further, but
Right.
I sort of proved to myself that it would work.
It would work. So I'm just wondering about the weight buildup, but maybe, you know, I mean, you'll see by F3P airplanes. I mean, the paint adds a lot of weight. I mean, it really does.
The problem is you spray paint or do you spray ink aid, you're probably both adding similar, but you're never going to be able to print or spray the detail with airbrush that you
Right.
can with the printer. That
Right.
was the thing. Weight-wise, probably similar, but you're going to get on Mylar
Yeah.
incredible detail.
Well, that's the thing. You can't get this kind of detail painting, you know. And actually, that's why I went to printing my. I mean, like I said, I love the paint, you know, for years, and I still love the paint. But you know, you could put, you know, all the rivets, panel lines in this stuff, and highlight it. And a lot of times, what I'll do is, you know, you want them to stand out, but you want it to look realistic too. So as you can play with the graphics. You know, you print it one way, and you can increase or decrease the effects of the rivets and the panel lines. So and it's just, again, it's trial and error. I think this one I did years ago, this B model, and you could see, you know, the panel lines are just a little bit they pop out just a little bit too much. But it's you know how you do it to your liking. Okay, so let's go back to the ink aid. So what I do is I use this white matte pre-coat, and I spray it, let it dry, spray it, let it dry. I do 3 coats of this. Now you can use just the white matte pre-coat, and it works really well. However, you can see, actually, like with the P51B, this is just painted with this white, and eventually it fades a little bit. So the colors, I mean, it still looks good, but they kind of lose their, you know, effectiveness. my Corsair, and especially this one here, I should probably just pass it around. This was done, I used about 3 coats of the white pre-coat, and then for a final coat, I use gloss clear. Okay, now it's not actually that glossy, but the gloss clear makes it pop, and it really makes the finish come out. And you can just hold your hands out, and you can look at it.
You did that after you printed?
After I printed, yeah, I printed. No, I did it before I printed. The gloss coat goes 3 coats of white, then a coat of the gloss. Okay, so now it's glossy. I send it through the inkjet printer. However, the problem is the white pre-coat is waterproof. So you can take that and you can stick it under the sink or whatever, and it's not going to smear your graphics. As soon as you spray the clear on it, it's not waterproof. This stuff is not waterproof, or so anything you take it outside in the dew and you get it'll ruin your finish. So now you got 4 coats on it. So what you have to do is I use this stuff. I brought it in here. Or maybe it's in my car. I use the Tester's dull coat, but it's just a spray of dull coat, and I just give it a quick spray. That's after I print the graphics. You know, it's all ready to go. I give it 1 coat of dull coat or 2 coats of dull coat, and that protects the finish. And that's what my little Corsair has on it. You know, it's got, you can see how the detail really pops. And that's an interesting model because that's got one of Stefan Gasparin's little brushless motors on it. It's got lights on it. 4 channels. And again, it's about 4 grams, maybe 4.5 grams. Yes, Sam.
What do you use for the cockpit? Because that's like the clear plastic on that.
Oh, you know what? Jeez, I forgot. You know, there's so much stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
I forgot to bring that. And again, how do you make the canopies? You talking about the canopy or actual? Yeah.
You use the canopy, like the plastic covering.
Because that is actually a really good question. You know, just like with these pieces here, you know, how am I going to make the canopies? Because you could use the canopies out of a plastic model kit, but if we're talking about, you know, we want to keep these models as light as possible. So what I do is I buy some clear heat shrink. You know, it's a pretty good thickness, and I take a piece of wood and I actually use the plastic canopy and I glue it onto the piece of wood. Then I take the heat shrink and kind of, you know, pin it in or tape it over the top of that, hit it with a heat gun, and it makes a perfect canopy. And it only takes like a second. That's how I did all the canopies on. I did it on the A10. So that was made with a piece of a heat shrink. And it weighs absolutely nothing. Actually, I can't take credit for the idea. It was Robert Gio actually, and he sent me the heat shrink and tried it. I was like, wow, Robert, you know, I was like, my God.
So I've been using the 005 PVC laminating film with the standard vacuum forming.
Yeah.
It stretches it really thin.
Right.
You get great detail with PLA printed 3D printer.
Yes.
Get great detail, real thin,
And it's very light. Yeah, it works really well. I mean, actually, this is one of Robert. I wish Robert was here. I should have contacted Robert. Did you talk to Robert? I mean, we probably should have. Yeah, we should have got Robert. He's has a lot of history with this event. It's a shame, but this is actually one of his airplanes, his P-51, and he made the canopy. I mean, absolutely beautiful. You know, he painted. This was actually painted. This was before we did our printing. He gave it to me as a gift. He couldn't get it to fly. The wing was creased, but I got it to fly. I don't know how he couldn't get it to fly, but and he's got a little wood prop that he carved on it, but really cute. But anyway, so yeah, so you basically spray that the clear on top of that and send it through. The only problem with this technique, and I've been working on perfecting this technique for years, is in the wintertime when it gets cold, if you spray the clear over it, these things, the foam starts to warp a little bit. You know, it shrinks and it starts to warp, and so you know you go out there in like January to fly your airplane at the indoor event, and you're like, holy cow, this isn't looking good. But it only, you know, and it's funny because certain years it'll do it, certain years it'll do it less, but it basically gives me the best technique as far as the finish. Now something on the little Corsair, I got carbon fiber bracing underneath here, and the same thing on the stabilizer, so it kind of holds the shape pretty good. So even if it warps a little bit, it's not that bad. But if you do like a bigger airplane with, you know, with different structure, it may be an issue. However, if you use just a straight white inkade, it will not warp. So you can use this, and it's waterproof, and it won't have any effect. Just like, and it actually looks pretty good. So I think I did my A10 with that. So I did this years ago, and it still looks decent with the white pre-coat. So
One other thing, if you can't find inkade, there's a product called Digital Ground, which you can find at AC Moore. That's pretty much the same.
Thing. I mean, I've heard guys use what, like hairspray or some crazy. I mean, I don't think that works, but
Digital Ground.
Hairspray, actually, the hairspray is not bad.
it's not bad.
I've tried that.
You've tried it, Gordon. It works.
It's not as good,
Yeah.
but you can go buy hairspray from CVS and spray it on something, and it will actually.
It'll actually
take
print
it.
on
It just needs something that it can soak into. But inkade is made for it, and it's the best.
And it works the best. Yeah, this is good stuff. So all right, I'll keep this thing moving. Actually, here's another little one I did of a P51. Martin made me the prop on that thing, a little carbon fiber 4-blade. It's really beautiful. So I gotta upgrade this to a little better airplane someday. But that's that. Okay, let me keep moving along here. So that's how basically I do this. I take my plastic model kit, I use it for a reference, and I print this stuff on the foam and assemble. I use UHU pour for most of the assembly. That foam glue. It works really good. And the 4mm motor is the gear drive, and this one just has a standard. I just cut this carbon fiber prop down to I think it's like 2 1/8 inches, and it works pretty good. The Corsair center round has a 3-bladed prop, which works good with that little gas bearing brushless motor, which unfortunately we can't get anymore. I mean, that thing was they're like gold. So, and speaking of projects, I got to say this. I mean, I usually, we talk like Thayer was talking before, how he stayed up till 5 in the morning working on his airplane. That's usually me. This is actually the first year that Henry came to my house and he said, "What? You're not working on an airplane?" I mean, I'm usually killing myself to get these things done. And I had a really cool project I was trying to finish. I started years ago, and it's a 1909 military Wright Flyer. And that's a pretty cool story because I started working on this plane. I said, wouldn't it be cool to build? And Stefan Gasparin, who passed away, I used to pen pal him all the time. I told him I was doing this project, and he made a drive system for me. And I thought, first I told him, I said, wouldn't it be cool if we could use, I tried to think of how I could simulate the chains with something that's peanut scale, so 13 inches. Like, how am I going to simulate the chains? I'm like, I can't do chains that small. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool to use O-rings? So he was a master with CO2 and O-rings. About a month or two later, I get this thing in the mail. He fully made the drive system with O-rings working on a test stand. I mean, perfect. I mean, the props and everything. So I got this thing sitting at my house, and I started working on the plane, and I had to get some plans. And there was a good set of plans from Arizona model aircrafters, and I told him what I was doing, and he actually sent them to me for nothing. They were like $75 for the plans. He mailed them to me. He said, I'll give you credit. I put it in the magazine or whatever. So I shrunk them down, and I started working on this thing. And I built the wings, so the wings are done, and they're going to perfectly warp. And I had to figure out where all the rigging goes, and I'm not an expert on the rigging. I need to talk to some of these free flight guys and get a little more advice on the rigging. But I basically had it all set up, and I think I just got burnt out. Something else came along, maybe really cool. I'm like, oh, I got to do that. So I stopped working on the project. And then of course we know Stefan Gasparin passed away. So I really need to do him justice and finish this airplane. And I was going to try to get done for this event. Hopefully by next year you'll see that thing fly. But anyway, I did do 2 new projects, and let's see. And one of them, we'll just make this quick here, is a Micro Aces Dash 2. And I gotta, he sent me this kit for review, so I gotta kind of pump some of this stuff. But it's actually a really nice kit. He does double-sided printing. So he took some ideas that we developed or helped develop, and he brought it to another step. He's doing double-sided printing on this really thin, that's like 1 mil Depron, and he does a nice job. I mean, the guy is like a graphic designer, so his graphics blow mine away. I mean, his shading and it's just absolutely beautiful. So he also takes these props and he has little stickers, and he covers the plastic, the props with these little stickers. It looks pretty good. And this has a rotating rotary engine, just like the real one, and it's a pusher. The only thing I don't like about his kits, and I never really told him this, I would have hurt his feelings. I mean, I love scale airplanes. He went through all this trouble to design this airplane with the rig. I mean, it looks beautiful. But if you look at his airfoil, look at his airfoil. It goes like this, and it goes like this, and he uses them in every airplane. I have the SE5, which I did a couple of years ago, but I'll just show you that too. Actually, Matt, this has machine gun sound and lights in it, just like Matt did years. So I put that in, inspired by Matt. But yeah, his kits are really nicely done. So you got to give him credit. He's coming out with some new stuff all the time. And if you guys are looking to build a nice foam scale airplane, you want to look at his website, because I really appreciate what he's doing. So not a lot of guys are building kits, and we need to encourage more people to build to keep this part of the hobby going. Okay, let's see what's next. Oh, I also did this airplane. So this was my second airplane I built. And I haven't actually built an all balsa plane in years. So this is a Cessna L19, and it's made by, Hobby Club sent it to me. They sent it to me for review, and it's one of those, it's a China dancing wings hobby airplane, but he's marketing like it's his kit. But I helped him out, so I did it for the magazine, and it's, like I said, it's pretty nice. It's got laser cut parts. One of the things with these all balsa kits, and I didn't even mention it. If you read my review, I don't even think I mentioned how I filled the balsa. Remember, Gordon, we had that Delta Stencil Magic, and I still have a couple cans of this stuff, and some of them are shot, you know, but this stuff is like magic. I mean, you give this thing like 2 coats of this Delta Magic spray, Stencil Magic spray, and it fills the balsa perfectly. And the airplane is like super light, you know, considering it's all balsa. And so anyway, you give it like 1 or 2 coats of this stuff, give it a light, you know, sand it down, and then I airbrushed it with some testers. I love the testers paints. I mean, there's all different kind of paints you could use. I didn't even put them in there. I thought I had them in there. But anyway, I used testers. I did some flat white because it gave me good coverage, and then the Dayglow orange, and then I hit it with you know, a shot of clear just to make it pop. One thing about this kit, though, as good as these kits are, I mean, how the heck they're selling these kits without any decals? I mean, I don't know. It just seems kind of crazy, but they got these all balsa kits with no decals. So I had to make my own decals for this airplane. And I'll touch real quickly on how to do that. It's real simple. You can buy decal paper from most of the hobby shops or online, even like Hobby Lobby sells them. Very easy to do, and they sell a white decal paper and a clear decal paper. So the first thing you want to do is you got to draw your graphics. Okay, so again, I use Adobe Illustrator. However, you want to draw them the right size. So before I even built this airplane, what I did was I scanned the wing and I scanned the fuselage, you know, into my computer. So then I imported it into Adobe Illustrator. Now it's exact size. So then I drew the markings. You know, it didn't take me long to draw the markings. A lot of times you'll stockpile these things and you have them, you know, so you could just shrink them down. So I drew my markings in Adobe Illustrator and I shrank them to fit the airplane. So then you take this inkjet paper and again, you just print it out just like anything else. You order an inkjet printer. So once you print it out, the problem is if you dip them in water, the graphics will just run right off the inkjet. So you have to coat it with something. So again, I use this Krylon Crystal Clear, and I give it like 1 or 2 coats of that, just a light coat of that, and that protects the decals from from running. I think I even have, this is one of the exact decals. I'll just pass it here if you want to see. I mean, it's not the best, but that was coated with the clear. And so the only problem with these two is you have to cut them out. So you take a scissors, you cut out the decals, and then you apply them to the airplane. And a lot of people find applying decals a little challenging because it's really hard to get them right. And when you put them on the model, you know, they'll bunch up and they'll, you know, it's not an easy task. So I use, let me see, I know I brought this here. And some stuff must have fell out of my box here, somewhere between here and in my house. There's 2 products here, this Micro Soil and Micro Sol. It's made by Microscale, Microset. So I use the setting solution, and basically what you do is you just take the setting solution, it's like water, and you brush this stuff on there, and you apply your decal wet. And I use a small brush, or in the case of the big ones, you know, sometimes I even use my fingers and slide it where you want to go, but you want to keep it really wet, you know, so you can slide it where you want it to go. And if it starts sticking and it isn't working right, you can apply more on top, just get it wet again, and go. And you also can take the brush and stick the brush underneath and kind of move it around, and then get it to set where you want it to be placed on the airplane. So once you do that, then you give the other let's see, this is the setting solution. So what you do is you brush this on next, this Micro Sol, and what that does is it kind of gives it a painted look. It actually, the decals can form really nicely, and they're really soft. You don't want to touch it at this point, and they look like almost like it was painted on. You also want to dry the decals before you do that. I usually take a paper towel or a napkin and just very gently dry it and get the bubbles out. But it's an easy process, and it doesn't take that long to create your own decals. But it is kind of a pain in the neck that the manufacturer are not including decals with the kit in the first place. So that's my L19. Let's see how am I doing on time here. I got a few more minutes. All right, I'll just make this quick. We talked about our F3P airplanes, and Gordon mastered the technique, you know, as doing the curved carbon fiber rod. So we both kind of were going back and forth on wanting to build these airplanes. What happened to me was I was at the Columbus event, the Horizon Indoor, and I saw Deb McGrath fly one of these beautiful F3P airplanes. I said, holy cow, that thing is out. I said, Devin, wouldn't that be cool if we could get one micro-size to fly? You know, and he said, oh yeah, that'd be really cool. You know, and I said, could I have a copy of your plans? And he told me back then, he goes, yeah, I'll give you a copy. And he's like doing world competition, and you know, he said he would give me a copy of his plans. So he goes, don't give them to anybody else, but I'll lend them to you. So I actually let that project slide for a while until, last year when Gordon and I, went down that rabbit hole again on building these light airplanes, because I thought it'd be so cool. We flew these little Vapors and these other light airplanes in our living room. I said, how cool would it be to fly an F-3P airplane in your living room? So that's where we were at. And what I did was I took Devin's design, and again, I shrunk it down. I imported it into Adobe Illustrator, and this is called the Anubis. And I shrunk this down to 18 inches. So this is an 18-inch wingspan. This weighs 12 grams. So it's 12 grams. It has Rushland's motor that Gordon talked about earlier, has Nick's servos, which work fantastic, and the clear Mylar. And we were talking about painting. Basically what I did was I made up some masks on my laser, and I just laser cut these paint masks out. And real simple. So you draw it up in Adobe Illustrator, laser cut them, and then just apply them to the airplane. It is really hard to get, as Gordon mentioned, to get a real clean lines on these things. I basically lay it on the table and lay I just made this out of like cardstock paper, and then I hit it with my airbrush. The problem is if you leave it on there, it'll run and ruin your graphics. As soon as you spray it, you got to pull that off, and so you try to get clean lines. This airplane also has these little speed brakes. I don't know. It does slow the airplane down, but it creates a lot of drag, so it may reduce the flying time a little bit. But again, it was Devin's design, and I thought it'd be really cool. I didn't want to spend a lot of time designing my own airplane. So I built this one, and then I wanted to go smaller, so I actually did. So that was 18 inches, and then I built this one. Not too far after that, I don't know how I banged this out, but Gordon was like, how the heck did you build that so quick? So that's my all-carbon version. And this again, the good thing about this design is it doesn't have any really curved pieces. So I kind of took some of these and I straightened them out. It uses 0.3 millimeter carbon fiber rod, so basically the lightest I could find. I got that from that place in California.
Composite store, yes.
Yeah, the composite store, and that worked really well. One thing I did different on this airplane was I had Rushland's brushless motor. However, the speed control on it was pretty heavy. And I'm like, holy cow! And it really, for some reason, on this little airplane, it didn't perform that well. I wasn't getting the vertical performance on it, and it just wasn't working as well as the other motor was. So I said, what the heck? I'm going to try putting a brush motor on. So I took a standard 6 millimeter brush motor, which isn't even a hot one. Nick and I were talking. This is out, I think, one of the Aries things. I forget how many ohms it is, but it's not even a hot 6 millimeter motor. But I attached it. It's got a little carbon fiber tube, so it rotates, and these little motors have a little spring in them. And so it just sets in there, and this thing really performs. You'll see it at the indoor tonight. I was going to fly it in here, but with the wind, I better not. But it weighs almost the same because it takes out the speed control. So without the speed control, it might be maybe slightly milligrams heavier, but I'm getting excellent performance, and I don't have to deal with that heavy speed control.
Yeah, the speed controller is like 0.35 grams, something like that.
Yeah.
And when you're talking of a plane that big.
Yeah, this airplane weighs, I think it's like 6.7 grams. At 13 inches, so it's got pretty. It's a little faster than that one, but it's still pretty light. This now uses Nick's 400 milligram servos that he made for me, and this actually has a half-gram servo, but Nick reduced the weight on this one, so it's. Oh, okay. I'm not supposed to tell you that. Yeah, it's a half-gram servo. Yeah. It's a top secret half-gram servo. So, but anyway, we'll fly that tonight. And a lot of guys, if you want to fly some of these airplanes, if it's not busy, I'll let you try your hands. As Gordon said, it's like flying. Adam said it's like flying in butter.
Honey.
Or honey. Yeah, that's better. Flying in honey. Oh, you guys seen this too. Martin, I was hoping Martin would even have something even smaller, but we went from my largest airplane, and I did this a couple years ago, but that was my smallest, my 1.5 inch triplane, and it's like 1 gram. It's actually kind of heavy. But it's got Nick's little 27 megahertz. How much does that receiver weigh, Nick? You remember? It's got to be like 50, 60 milligrams.
Right.
50 or 60 milligrams. And I can't even see the coil in there and the magnet. So it's got Nick's magnet on it. It's actually Gordon's design. So again, when I took all this information you're getting from everybody here in this room that we've gathered over the years, we take this information and we kind of, apply it to our stuff and try to do something pretty cool. So I took Gordon's design because I didn't want to design another airplane, and Gordon's design had a lot of wing area. I needed something with a lot of wing area to get to fly. So I took his triplane and Nick's receiver, actuator, and I took a little 3.2 millimeter motor and a little prop and got this thing to fly. It doesn't fly long. Henry's seen it fly. I flew it at the Horizon Indoor event years ago. So it only flies maybe, if I get 45 seconds out of it, I'm lucky. But it's fast. It's like a little bug. But it's really cute. It is like a little bug. Maybe we'll try to fly it tonight or tomorrow. The batteries are kind of weak, but we'll see how it goes.
It's
But
mind-boggling.
pretty cool, huh, Henry?
What do you use for battery in that thing?
I got that from Nick. These little 8 mil batteries, and I don't know if we can get, maybe Mac we can get something lighter. I don't know. Probably not. I only have a few of them, and they're kind of weak. But Nick said he's got a 10 that actually weighs the same as the old 8 and has a lot more power. So no, you know what, man? I got the batteries. I probably got it in my car. It just lays on the bottom.
Oh, okay. The flat.
Yeah, it just lays flat. It's just sticking out. It's just a little thing. But Nick said he has a battery that weighs exactly the same with more power. So maybe we can get it. Well, I'll have to get a battery from one of these days. But maybe we can get a better flight out of it. So we'll see. But I think that's it. Okay. So any questions? I mean, that's pretty much it for my presentation.
Joe, thank you.